Chapter 13, The Palace Soldiers. Ayaan Noto. Being a king has never been an easy task, and nobody has claimed it was. Now that I get to be the king of Amer, I certainly would confirm that kingship is not for the faint of heart. We were defeated in the Battle of Niveden. Again. By those cratty Nivens. Cheaters, bastards, vile creatures that do not fight their enemies equally. Regardless, there must be someone to blame for this loss. Always, there is someone who did wrong in the game of war. Always. The question is, what must I do to teach my soldiers a lesson? I walked at a fast pace towards the center of the encampment. The crunching sound of dried leaves resounded as my boots pressed on them. The throng of soldiers guarding me walked ahead and behind me, ensuring that I would be safe wherever I went. Such was the privilege of being a king. "This is it," I said. "Rouse everyone. It is time for these soldiers to receive their first lecture from their king." 4 of the guards who escorted me scattered to the 4 corners of the encampment, waking up the soldiers a tent at a time. In a matter of minutes, they were back beside me, and we were all surrounded by those encamped. I studied the soldiers. Did they look scared? Those who looked the most frightened, I will use as pawns. It is hard to be king and general at the same time. While one needs to be the beacon in war, the other must protect the realm. Because of the emperor's bidding, I have become both. He knew that I could manage to be both. Not everyone is given this highest honor. Something has been troubling me for days now. The Battle of Niveden is not something to be proud of. While we had the tree runners on our side, we seemed to have been underhanded from that battle. I paused. Do you get what I mean? The soldiers remained silent. None of them could barely lift their eyes to meet mine. And why is that? I said, daring one of them to speak out. I walked closer to them, trying to catch their gaze, but none would meet my stare. Do you know why? I said louder this time. Because instead of practicing, you slept. A soldier who does not refine his swordsmanship every day loses confidence when he comes face to face with another blade in battle, and that is exactly what happened at Niveden. You had your arrows knocked and ready to release, and yet, they hardly hit anyone. Anyone. You had your swords out, and yet it was the enemy's swords that caused more damage in that carnage. You're supposed to have trained countless hours in the Kanelan Palace. By God, I trained you myself, screened you, and accepted you into my army. But now, you humiliate me in the Emperor's eyes. What do you deserve then? Nobody answered. I removed my robe, its velvety texture grazed my arms as I threw it towards one of my servants, who, scampering, caught it and immediately went on to fold it neatly. I stretched out my hand to one of the soldiers and said, "Give me your sword." The soldier immediately handed me a long blade. I inspected it, ran my thumb across its edge, and winced as I felt the blunt edge. This well-crafted sword could kill someone slowly and painfully. Satisfied with what I was holding in my hand, I swung it and heard a loud swoosh. "Dance with me," I said. "Any among you, come play with me." Nobody dared move in their positions. Someone stirred from behind the first line of soldiers until I saw a muscular soldier who was probably a few moon turns younger than I. He was holding a sword. He had a good form, and his grip was steady. I waited for him to attack, and when he did, I hit against his blade, pivoted on my left heel, and when I was close enough to his body, hit him on his ribs with my elbow. Turning to the right, I lifted my sword and, with its hilt, thumped the back of his head. The soldier fell to the ground. His sword was a loud thud that fell a few feet away from him. "Come, fight me. All of you. I will show you what lack of practice does to any soldier." Under the heat of the sun, I squinted. This time, 3 soldiers surrounded me. I took a moment to study them. One was tall and lean, who looked like he could leap and pounce at his enemies. The other was shorter but slightly more muscular. He had shorter arms, though, which could be a disadvantage for him. I was no longer able to study the third man as the tall one attacked from behind me. I ducked to avoid his sword and staved him off several times before performing a circle parry as I tried to catch the tip of his sword and loosen his grip. He was quick to ward me off and lunged. I stepped back before striking his blade strongly, causing him to fall a few steps backward. This gave me enough time to turn around to the two other opponents that I had. The shorter one attacked and raised his arms. He swung at me as though intending to slice me in one motion. I backed away as I stretched my arms and met his sword, striking fervently at him several times. And when I knew that he would strike back his strongest, I withdrew my sword, causing him to lose balance as he put his weight on that last strike. Before I could think, another soldier had raised his sword at me. I firmed my stance before feinting. When he attacked, I was able to circle parry and thump the soldier's forearm hard enough to make him loosen his grip on his sword. He bent down in a rush to pick up the sword, but I did not want to fight him anymore, so I raised my right leg and kicked him in his buttocks. As I turned around, I was almost caught by a wrath blow as the tall soldier swung his sword from above, diagonally, aiming for my left ear. I stepped sideways and hit him hard with the blunt edge of my sword once, twice, until he fell on his knees. He was quick to turn and face me as he lay down. He kicked his feet in the air and bounced back again, immediately assuming a fighting stance. I would have none of this anymore, though. It was time to finish the fight. I lunged, aiming for his left torso, and when I missed, moved in an arc to attack his lower limbs. He did not expect that. Before he could react, I flicked my sword against his hand, which held the sword. His sword fell to the ground. 2 opponents down, only 1 more to go. This boy was staring at me right in the eye. Sweat was dripping from his jaw straight to the dry ground. The scorching heat made us all sweat like pigs. Come on, I urged. Scorn touched my lips. Too afraid to get hurt? I smirked. The soldier leapt towards me, a courageous and yet stupid mistake on his part. Never let the enemy's taunting affect you because it would be the death of you. I have always reminded those who train under me, never lose your control. When you lose it, you have already lost. I sidestepped, waited for the soldier's feet to hit the ground, and very lightly grazed the edge of my sword across his back. I felt the cloth of his shirt rip as my sword went through it. I thumped him on his shoulder hard enough to send him to the ground. All 3 of them now lay flat on the earth. It happened so quickly, all in the space of mere seconds. I hardly lifted a finger, I told myself. Also, it was to my advantage that my power is strength. Nevertheless, if I had not practiced my craft every day, I would not have been able to execute what I just did. My heart was hardly pumping by the time we had finished. Practice, I said. If we lose our next battle, remember that the Emperor may not be as forgiving as I am to you today. With that, I turned away and headed back to my tent. I suddenly missed Rhodora. After a good practice, I craved her. But for now, all I wished was that she was safe. The day was not over, and it became even more apparent as I entered my tent. A tall man was standing in the middle of my quarters. He turned around as he sensed my presence. "Your Grace," he said, bowing. "I came here to tell you the news about the Emperor's success in calling out the other provinces to renew their alliance with him. All of Akea will stand united behind the Emperor. This news should be enough to discourage citizens from joining any more uprising." I nodded to acknowledge the message. That would be good. The sooner the uprisings are put to an end, the sooner I could go back to being a king. I want to enjoy my new title. And after that, I can be the High King if I could prove to the Emperor that I was worthy of the title. "But," he said. "Continue," I said, raising my eyebrows. "This doesn't mean that the rebels are not getting support as well. There are always some townsfolk who are convinced that the empire must be taken down. And there have been rumors that there are active recruiters in smaller towns seeking to enjoin the citizens into these rebellions. Death will come to them in due time," I said. "I'm telling you, it's just a matter of time."